You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. Fighting between Russia and Ukraine surged as Moscow assembled more than 50,000 troops to retake the Kursk region, and the two countries exchanged their largest drone attacks over the weekend. France and the United Kingdom reiterate that they will support Ukraine for as long as necessary. North Korea has ratified a landmark mutual defense pact with Russia, state media has reported, weeks after sending thousands of troops to help Moscow in its war against Ukraine and sealing a deepening security cooperation between the two nations. Israel's foreign minister has said that there has been some progress in ceasefire talks in Lebanon, where Israel has been battling Hezbollah for over 13 months. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman demanded Israel stop its military aggression in Gaza and Lebanon in his opening address before Arab leaders on Monday, referencing Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Oil prices fell by more than 2% on Monday after China's latest stimulus plan disappointed investors seeking demand growth in the world's second biggest oil consumer. China's highly anticipated J-35A fighter jet debuts at the Zhuhai Air Show, but Beijing's secrecy means little is known about its capabilities. US President-elect Donald Trump picks Mike Waltz, a Florida congressman and co-chair of the India caucus, as his new national security advisor. Trump, meanwhile, picks Tom Homan, a hardline anti-immigration border official, as his border czar. Well, our big focus, Russia has amassed a large force of tens of thousands, including recently arrived North Korean troops, to actually carry out an assault on the Ukrainian positions in Russia's Kursk region, expected in the coming days as per multiple reports. Ukraine, meanwhile, has said that its hard-pressed military is battling 50,000 troops in Russia's Kursk region to its north, while also scrambling to reinforce two besieged fronts in the east and bracing to meet an infantry assault in the south. But this escalating fight along more than 1,000 kilometers of front line is stretching Ukraine's already outnumbered troops at a critical moment after Donald Trump won the US election. Ukraine invaded the Kursk region over the summer, as we have been extensively covering, shocking Russia in the first invasion of the country since World War II. But Ukraine's incursion has not stopped Russia's steady advancement in the eastern part of Ukraine, where its army chief has warned his forces are facing one of the most powerful Russian offensives since the start of the war. Meanwhile, with Donald Trump set to return to the White House, France and the United Kingdom have reiterated that they will support Ukraine for as long as necessary to thwart Russia's war of aggression. In fact, this is what French President Emmanuel Macron and Sir Keir Starmer from Britain have said. This also comes amid concerns that Trump will actually halt US aid to Kyiv. Meanwhile, Israel's foreign minister has said that there has been some progress in ceasefire talks in Lebanon, where Israel has been battling Hezbollah for over 13 months now. He also mentioned that the diplomatic talks were ongoing with US mediation, but noted that the lack of a clear mechanism for any future agreement remains a major challenge. Israel's primary goal in its ground invasion of southern Lebanon is to allow displaced residents of northern Israel to actually get home, to come back home. Tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee since Hezbollah began launching rockets in support of Hamas on the 8th of October. And diplomatic efforts were not only confined to US channels, as Israel's Army Radio reported that Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, visited Russia last week to discuss ways to reach a ceasefire as far as Lebanon is concerned.
Certain progress working on the issue. We are working with the Americans on the issue. There is progress, and we will be ready to be there if we will know, first of all, that Hezbollah is not on our border, is north and to the Litani River, and that Hezbollah will not be able to arm again with new weapon systems and so on.
Meanwhile, Israel's far-right finance minister has said he hoped Israel would extend sovereignty into the occupied West Bank in 2025 and that he would push the government to engage the incoming Trump administration to gain Washington's support. Listen in to what he had to say.
יש היום קונצנזוס רחב בעם, קואליציה, אופוזיציה, ימין ושמאל, כל חלקי החברה הישראלית של התנגדות חד משמעית להקמת מדינת טרור פלסטינית שתסכן את קיומה של מדינת ישראל ותהפוך במהרה לבסיס איראני קדמי שחותר להשמדת מדינת ישראל. שנת 2025 תהיה בעזרת השם שנת הריבונות ביהודה ושומרון.
Meanwhile, the Arab Islamic Summit kicked off yesterday afternoon on the 11th of November in the Saudi Arabia capital Riyadh to discuss Israel's ongoing war in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman demanded Israel stop its military aggression in Gaza and Lebanon. This was in his opening address before Arab leaders, referencing, and I quote, Israel's genocide of Palestinians. His comments came just days after Qatar stopped mediating negotiations, temporarily though, between Israel and Hamas because of both sides' unwillingness to engage constructively. But Saudi Arabia has been careful to present a unified Arab front when it comes to the Palestinian cause. One expert on record, making Riyadh unlikely to fill in as chief mediator, has actually said. But the incoming Trump administration will likely pressure the kingdom to normalize relations with Israel. But those talks are foundering, with the United States and Saudi Arabia now discussing a bilateral security deal, as per multiple reports. Well, let's turn our attention to the other crucial story we're tracking. This year, the world is on pace for 1.5 degrees of warming and is headed to become the hottest year in human civilization. 2024 is on track to be the hottest year in history, with temperatures hitting shocking new highs, the World Met Organization has just warned. In fact, a report released on the opening day of the UN Climate Change Conference COP29 that reveals that from January to September, the global average temperature soared 1.54 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. This alarming spike, driven by a fierce El Nino and the relentless rise in greenhouse gas emissions, is now pushing our planet past dangerous tipping points, and the consequences are already unfolding. The clock is ticking on climate change, and the heat is only rising. Just listen in to what the World Met Organization's Secretary General had to say.
And this is another SOS to the planet. The State of Climate Update confirms that 2024 is on track to be the hottest year on record, hotter even than 2023, which smashed all previous records. 2015-2024 will be the warmest 10 years on record. The pace of climate change in the space of just one generation is alarming.
And joining us for further clarity, we have with us climate change expert Nagraj Adve. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us on the World 24/7. A crucial aspect is the unprecedented temperature increase, right? I mean, the average global temperature for the first 9 months of 2024 exceeded the pre-industrial level by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Mr. Adve, take us through the stark findings of this latest report.
Well, this latest report is an update on the report that they had a few weeks ago. And it touches upon the core of climate science and its impacts. So, for instance, it covers the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in 2023, which was 420 parts per million. And it also covers as you just mentioned, the average rate of warming in the last 9 months, which is about over 1.5 degrees. It talks very worryingly about, so you see a lot of the heat trapped by greenhouse gases goes into the oceans. And this report tells us that over the last 15 years, it has trapped the heat equal to 18 times the world's entire energy consumption. It's
That's
not just
phenomenal.
electricity consumption, it is all the energy consumption. That is to say, besides electricity, your cars, your industries, your ACs, everything all over the world, 18 times has gone in the oceans. It talks about the loss of glaciers, which is equal to the water of 5 times the volume of the Dead Sea. We are talking about massive, massive kind of changes and impacts. And what's also worrying, I should point to two things, which maybe the report doesn't talk about, is the fact that last year in 2023, the land sinks, that is to say, the forests, trees, grasslands, etc., which normally take in about 8 billion tons of carbon dioxide, hardly took in any at all. It was close to zero. So what that implies is that that 8 billion stays in the atmosphere, causing much further warming. That's really, really worrying. And secondly, we've got these massive ecosystems and ocean currents that are slowing down, whose impacts are even beyond our imagination, and in particular, an Atlantic current called the AMOC. So this year has been just terribly worrying, and this report and this update released yesterday sort of captures the essence of what's going on.
It is rather alarming indeed. Ms. Salve, one cannot ignore, though, that a backdrop of war and upheaval also hangs over the talks that are happening in Azerbaijan as we speak. As things stand, would you say we are on the road to ruin?
Well, I wouldn't like to use the word ruin because it has a kind of doomsday aspect about it. We certainly are on a very, very grave road. Crossing 1.5 degrees is no joke because
Absolutely.
every 0.1 degrees of warming means accelerating impacts. It means that if we stay at 1.5 degrees of fire. So let me just point out that this temperature in the report also includes a slight factor of the El Nino, which is this Pacific Ocean current, which
Yes.
also contributes to warming, but only contributes to a degree. For example, the last time of the El Nino in 2016, which was even stronger than the current one we just got over, despite that, it was much less warm. So actually, it is global warming that's underlying factor. Now, next year, when the effects of the El Nino kind of wear off, what will happen is that the average rate of warming will come down, but it will come down only slightly.
Right.
After the last El Nino, global temperatures only fell by about 0.1 degrees Celsius. Now, we are going to unavoidably cross 1.5. Now, the problem is actually that for certain ecosystems, if you stay at 1.5 for a sustained period of time, it tips them over into completely new states. And that is just deeply worrying. It means that they will not recover like the Arctic ice, and they will not recover into their current state for the foreseeable future. And when I say foreseeable future, I'm talking of thousands of years.
Right.
In addition, an average one, so far we've been talking about averages, but we have to keep in mind that an average temperature of 1.5 means a much higher temperature for regions like the Himalaya. So 1.5 globally means for much of the Himalayan regions, something like 2.5 degrees Celsius. So, and higher than 1.5 means an even higher impact in the Himalayan range, which is already seen, a loss of glaciers, drying of streams, etc., which impacts ordinary people, including women in different states.
I think we all agree that urgent action is needed. In fact, we've been talking about this year on year. COP29 climate summits have happened year on year. In fact, diplomats have greenlit key rules that govern the trade of carbon credits as well. But critics have warned that the rules were rushed through without following proper process. But thank you so much, Mr. Adve, for joining us with your insight on the World 24/7. Meanwhile, the United Nations annual climate talks got off to a rocky start with more than 9 hours of behind-the-scenes wrangling over the agenda for the next 2 weeks. But once that was settled, the focus actually shifted to the key issue, which is money. But dozens of activists protested inside the COP29 venue in Baku in Azerbaijan, holding banners calling for climate justice, as you can see on your screens, and for nations to stop fueling genocide. Many of them were actually wearing Palestinian keffiyehs. Protesters said that there can be no climate justice without human rights. But so far in Baku, where the world's first oil well was drilled and the scent of fuel still lingers in the air, as many say, the talks have been less about fossil fuels and more about the flow of money. Countries are actually negotiating how wealthy nations can pay poorer ones to help reduce carbon emissions, shift to clean energy, compensate for climate-related disasters, and also adapt to the extreme weather events of the future.
The climate crisis is an existential crisis. 2024 is on track to become the hottest year ever recorded, and last year global greenhouse gas emissions reached an all-time high. And in this moment that the UNFCCC is hosting yet another COP climate meeting in an authoritarian petro-state is beyond absurd.
Now let's turn our attention to the United States. Well, Stephen Miller, an architect of the hardline immigration policies Donald Trump enacted during his first term, appears to be heading back to the White House as the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. In fact, the US President-elect has also appointed Tom Homan, who is one of the main officials behind Trump's family separation policy, as his border czar. By the way, he told Fox News, if sanctuary cities don't want to help us, then get the hell out of the way because we're coming. Trump has also picked Elise Stefanik, a critic of the United Nations and a hawkish supporter of Israel, as his ambassador to the United Nations. And Mike Waltz has now been picked, who's a Florida congressman and co-chair of the India caucus, as Trump's new national security advisor. To make sense of the latest appointments, we have with us journalist Ray Locker. Thanks so much, Ray, for making time for us. Do these appointments clearly signal that the next US administration under Trump's guidance will take a rather tough stance on immigration?
Oh, obviously. I mean, Tom Homan has been talking about this for years, ever since he left the administration in 2021. He was a tough hardliner when he was head of ICE during the first Trump administration. And Stephen Miller has been notorious for backing hardline anti-immigration stands.
Do these appointments also signal that the next US administration will staunchly and publicly oppose any efforts by multilateral bodies to restrain Israel, meanwhile, or risk US funding and support altogether? What are you picking up on?
Well, I think Trump has signaled that he's going to let Israel do whatever it wants. I don't know where Mike Waltz would come in on that, or Elise Stefanik, but I know that she's a hardline Israel supporter, been active in fighting what she perceives as anti-Semitism on college campuses. And she's also a pretty smart person, very well educated, and has evolved from being a moderate during the first Trump administration to a very tough pro-Trump supporter. Mike Waltz is a former Green Beret, worked for Dick Cheney when he was vice president, and so he knows, this very well as well.
Right. In all, though, so far, as many argue, Ray, Trump's cabinet picks echo his plans on immigration and Israel primarily. Do you agree, or is there more than that meets the eye?
No, I think immigration is the biggest thing that he's been talking about, and picking Homan and Stephen Miller is a sign of what he intends to do. I think some people didn't take it seriously. I think we're going to see now that Latino men who voted for him are going to find out that members of their friends and family circles are going to be deported, and that's going to rip that community apart. We don't know how much this is going to cost. We don't really know what they're planning on doing. But if some of the apocalyptic predictions come true, you're going to see people all across the country being ripped from their homes and businesses and sent, wherever they came from. And that's going to have a tremendous dislocating effect on the economy, could drive inflation because it could create a labor shortage. So there are all sorts of untold effects from this policy if it unfolds the way that some of these people are talking about.
That is rather worrying, as many have highlighted. In fact, that's a fear that many echo as well within the United States come January. But thank you so much, Ray, for joining us with the latest updates from the US. As always, news and updates continue in a moment right here on NDTV. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Oil prices fell by more than 2% on Monday after China's latest stimulus plan disappointed investors seeking demand growth in the world's second biggest oil consumer, while supply looked set to rise in 2025. In fact, analysts warn that Donald Trump's US election victory may continue to affect the market. Sakshi Bajaj joins us with the latest on how the US election, with Trump's promise to drill baby drill, has taken away some incentive to go long, as analysts point out.
Oil prices declining over 2% in overnight trade, both Brent and WTI prices declining sharply in trade. First, for our viewers to understand, why have these prices declined? Now, China announced a stimulus measure, a measure essentially to boost their economy at large, and investors seem disappointed with that. Remember, China is the world's second largest oil consumer, and therefore now experts feel that demand will be weaker coming from China, and therefore that's one of the reasons we've seen prices decline. The other reason we've seen prices decline is the threat to the US storm that earlier was seeming large has now eased. So that's the second key reason why oil prices have declined in overnight trade. Now, what is interesting to note here as far as historical trends are concerned, remember, winter demand usually causes prices to rise, and this reversal is of course interesting to wait and watch out for. As far as oil importing nations are concerned, for India, this is great news if this trend continues at large.
Let's turn our attention now to Spain, where Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced an additional 3.76 billion euros, that's about $4.01 billion, in emergency funding to help rebuild the Valencia region following Spain's deadliest flash floods in modern history. More than 220 people lost their lives after heavy rains on October 29th caused devastating floods that swept through the suburbs south of Valencia. But this new aid package is in addition to the 10.6 billion euros already announced last week to support recovery efforts in Spain. Meanwhile, the northern Philippines is experiencing its fourth tropical cyclone in 3 weeks. Typhoon Toraji, also known as Nika, is passing westwards over the island of Luzon with winds equivalent to a Category 1 hurricane. But why is this so alarming and unusual? Well, even though the Philippines is no stranger to cyclones, with about 20 hitting the nation each year, it is unusual for the same region to experience so many in such a short space of time. In fact, the northern Philippines may need to brace for yet another cyclone later this week. A quick update from the neighborhood. Pakistan's jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that in a few days he will announce the date for a nationwide protest march aimed at rallying support for his party's demands. Imran Khan, via post on X, has said, "This time, our people will not return to their homes. Our protest will continue until the restoration of the constitution, democracy, and independent judiciary, and the release of our innocent workers and leaders." And China's highly anticipated J-35A fighter jet debuted at the Zhuhai Air Show. But Beijing's secrecy means little is known about its capabilities, as per a latest Reuters report. China has prioritized aerospace manufacturing as it seeks regional military dominance over the US amid tensions around Taiwan and the South China Sea, as panelists. And the issue has gained urgency given Donald Trump's plans to decouple supply chains from Beijing. But the show is likely to demonstrate after other Chinese ambitions and shifts. The China-made C919 commercial airliner will be a major source of interest, while Moscow has dispatched its most advanced fighter jet to the show, an indication of its deepening military ties with Beijing. We thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.